having a conversation with my wife today. She was playing a word game on her phone, so it's like a word puzzle game. And I forget what I said, but the conversation ended up going somewhere where we started debating the meaning of staring at your phone. And her side of it was, I'll use the phrase staring at your phone when she's playing her word game, but that's inaccurate because she's not like she defines staring at your phone as, doing something bad, doing something you shouldn't be doing. Whereas I was being literal, like, well, you were literally staring at your phone playing the game. I didn't have a negative connotation on it. So we started debating that a bit. And the point I tried to make to her, at least the hypothesis, I guess I'd say, was like, I see where you're coming from. I know those word games are good for you and they're good kind of like mental cognition games, which are a good thing. But I would imagine there's at least a part of you that has, for lack of a better word, like an insecurity or at least a concern that what you're doing is negative in some way. That's the reason you're getting defensive, right? Because what she would often do is if I say something, because what actually happened was we were sitting next to each other and I said to her, like, hey, I don't mean this to come off negative the way it's going to sound, but are you going to keep looking at your phone? Because if you are, I'm going to read my book. If you're not, we could talk. And she replied by defending herself and being like, well, I'm not staring at my phone. I was just playing this game. And she started putting her phone down. And I was saying, like, hey, you don't have to get defensive. I wasn't suggesting anything was bad. I was just literally asking because I don't mind. I'll read or I'll talk to you, whatever you prefer. So with that context, my point to her was the reason you felt compelled to defend yourself is because you at least are considering the idea that there's something negative about you looking at your phone, even if it's playing a word game. I'm not saying it is negative, but I think that's indicative of the fact that you're at least considering that. And we kind of went back and forth on that. And it made me start to think about defensiveness in general. And if you think about defensiveness, I mean, in its purest form, you're trying to protect yourself, right? You're defending, you're trying to protect yourself from something. So obviously there are situations where you feel like you're in some danger, whether that be physical, emotional, psychological, whatever, and you literally defend yourself because you're trying to stop yourself from being hurt in some way, from some outside external thing, right? But in this situation, right, I think often in today's world, the way our minds work, the way defensiveness manifests itself is much less in the traditional sense of that, where I feel like you are putting me in some danger, therefore I need to defend. It's much more an internal thing. It's much more what we're talking about here, about staring at your phone. To the point where I would even say, in cases like this, where arguably there was no actual threat to her, if you get defensive, if you feel compelled at whatever degree it is to defend yourself or to make the case as to why you're not doing something bad, if there's any emotional charge in how you respond, I think it's almost logically true that that's a proof point that you do have some concern about that thing. It's more of a projection about what you think than it is about what the other person thinks, right? So let me say it another way. If my wife was totally confident, without any doubt, that what she was doing was totally fine, playing these word games on her phone, I would argue she would have no reason to be defensive at all. Right? I could say whatever I want to say, like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you staring at your phone? However I worded it, whatever tone I used, assuming I wasn't being like menacing where there was a true threat there, her response should be neutral and indifferent. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm playing a word game. No big deal. Right? If she was eating a salad for lunch and I said, hey, what are you doing? Eating a salad? Her response would be neutral, most likely, right? And be like, yeah, having a salad. Or yeah, sure, like whatever. In theory, that's what it should always be, unless there's something in you, right? You have some question, you have some insecurity, you have some consideration that the thing you're doing is wrong, right? If she was eating Twinkies for lunch, and I said, what are you eating, Twinkies for lunch? You can imagine a scenario where it's, well, listen, I was really busy today, or, I already had lunch, or I'm treating myself for some reason. Again, there's a reason to defend, because it's less about what that person's saying. That's the trigger, obviously, right? And the way I said it to my wife is it's almost like two keys need to turn the switch, right? For defensiveness. Sure, there is some external stimuli that has to come forward that triggers something. But if that other key isn't there, that other key being your own insecurity or questioning that maybe something I'm doing is wrong, you won't have defensiveness. The only way you get defensiveness is if both those keys turn. So back to the debate I was having with my wife, that's the point I was trying to make to her. That not like maybe you're right. Maybe I did trigger you in some way or say it in some way that had a connotation implying that it was negative. But there has to be some part of you that also at least considers it. Doesn't mean it is negative, doesn't mean you're wrong, doesn't mean you shouldn't be playing those word games. But I would argue logically, that's that second key that has to be there. The defensiveness would not be there unless that piece was there as well. So kind of just like an interesting anecdote from daily life, but it made me think about defensiveness and how we think and how we work. And I think for many of us, if we think of it that way as a proof point, right? Next time we get defensive about whatever it is, you run a couple checks and you say, well, first check, am I actually in danger? Do I literally feel like there's a threat to me right now? If there's not, then you have to go to that second check and say, well, if I'm defensive, that likely means I believe there might be something wrong here. So let me explore that and let me work through it, because then one of two things is going to happen. Either A, you'll realize, no, everything's totally fine. No need to be defensive, no issue, go about my business. Or B, oh, wow, there is something here that I don't actually like, or I wish was different, or I could change. And then you can go ahead and change it. So it's all good outcomes. It's just being able to diagnose the actual issue. And I think this might be a mechanism to do that.